Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Darren Coleman. Most of you know me. The team and I look after you. And for those of you that will be watching the recording, hello, beautiful day out there today. So thank you for joining us from wherever you are. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Janine Davies. Janine is the VP and Executive Director of the Raymond James Canada Foundation. And today we're going to talk about philanthropy, how people can give, thoughts and trends in giving, and how we can support people in making that philanthropic gift for them, for their family or memory of loved ones. So Janine, why don't we talk a little bit first about your role within Raymond James and how you support advisors and our clients in a general term, then we'll dig into some specifics over the next 20 to 35 minutes.
Great. Well, thanks, Darren, and it's great to be here and great to chat with your clients. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, I am what you would consider a recovering banker and started in the industry in brokerage. So I have been an advisor, branch manager, and so most of my experience comes originally from frontline and being a volunteer and being a board member. So my role here at Raymond James is specifically to support the Raymond James advisors in their philanthropic journey, specifically with clients. So many of our advisors have their own charitable giving funds, also known as donor advised funds, as well as our clients. And we have a cadre of clients that we support, and we help them really down that philanthropic journey. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, because I believe that philanthropy is very individual, and it's important that the client really has their voice heard. And oftentimes we see a lot of cookie cutter approaches or people working directly with charities, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we just know our clients are a little bit more sophisticated and really want to make a difference. So I've got lots of great questions I usually ask them, and it's fun for me because really I get to discover the passion, the spirit, and what they're trying to accomplish.
No, that's great. And I know when we dig in and we do, as you know, we do a lot of planning with clients. We do really deep dives, and we treat planning as an ongoing active process. I think we're one of the only teams in Canada that has 4 CFPs on the team. So one thing that always comes up in every conversation with every client at some stage is, what are we going to do for outside of our own families, right? So we've met our goals, we've done the things we want to do. What else would we like to accomplish? And part of it's like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing, right? Like, what do we do for others? And so some conversation about philanthropy winds up being in someone's plan somewhere. Maybe it's, the phone call that comes in, I give a little bit to a charity, but we'd like to help clients get a little more structure and process and discipline around it. And so that does lead into a conversation at some point. And I think this year in particular is an interesting one to really understand how critical it is. So like, you deal with lots of charities across Canada all the time. What's the pandemic been like for them this year? Because everyone's had to adjust to it. What's going on in their world? And I think because that may add some urgency for people if they can help to really kind of move forward faster this year. So what are they experiencing?
Well, I think one of the biggest industries or biggest segments within the charitable landscape right now that's experienced the most hardship is the food bank system. So we've asked a system that traditionally takes physical donations, they take cash, and we've asked them to automate, we've asked them to completely rebuild and innovate their business models. And that's a really hard thing to do on the fly while trying to support. So what we do know is right now and in Canada, our trends are 47% of all giving in Canada happens in November and December. So what does that mean for the rest of the year? It means that people are giving, but they're just not giving at a rapid rate. From the charities that I'm talking to, and Darren, I know you've listened to some of the seminars we've given here at Raymond James for our associates and our employees. We recently had the CEO of Food Banks Canada come, and he's very clear in saying 25% of charities are on the bubble. At the time that the pandemic hit, there was a significant flood in Fort McMurray, and the entire food bank, like all their supplies, were 16 feet underwater. Wow. So not only did he have to deal with the food bank issue, but the nice thing about Food Banks Canada is that they take in donations from across Canada, and then they can strategically deploy them. So a lot of the initiatives that we've supported, and we gave over 150,000 here at Raymond James, that money that we sent, most of it went up to Fort Mac, so that they could find a new location and reset up and set up completely in a completely different structure. And most of those types of organizations run almost entirely on volunteers. 54% of 54% of charities in Canada are entirely volunteer run. So just imagine, and a lot of those volunteers are the plus 60 range. So we've got the double whammy with the pandemic. Now we can't physically have our volunteers there. And we're asking people to use technology in a way that may not be a technologically savvy type of organization. So, these charities have just been beaten up. And as I said, 25% of them are on the bubble right now. So if there was ever
Wow.
a year that you were going to give, now I've heard from other people saying, well, if this charity is going to die, it should die now. I'm like,
Mm,
okay, well,
that's a
not
pretty harsh view, but I get it.
yeah, and separating the wheat from the chaff. But if you look at the political environment, a lot of these charities are really doing core services that are downloaded
Yeah.
from government. And the smaller ones really don't get much government funding. They rely on those direct donations from donors like your clients.
No, and that's true, and I know that because I sit on the investment committee for the community foundation of Mississauga, which
Hmm.
winds up raising money almost as an umbrella, and then it feeds a lot of small individual causes and charities that would never be able really to fundraise sufficiently on their own. And so I get to be part of that process, and it's gotten me more involved with a lot of the charitable work that happens within the city where I and my family live. And I've gotten involved not just in that, but I did the Dancing with the Stars not once but twice. I don't know why they invited me back to dance again, but
I did it too,
um, you did the Dancing with the Stars too?
I think of my pictures in the office.
Oh my God. Have you got
Right there.
video? Send video.
No, but see, I broke my foot. Anyhow, I digress. But I just want to say
In
on
the
that point.
dance, you broke your foot? What?
No, before I was doing my master's and I tripped when I was in Victoria, and I
Oh
had,
no.
but I kept practicing, and my doctor said I shouldn't, otherwise I'd have permanent damage. Anyhow,
So
I
you
knew
never
I was
got to
going
do
to
the
win.
dancing in front of people?
No, I want to do it again. Maybe we should do it at the next conference.
No, no, no.
Mine was
I'm done.
disco.
I'm hanging up my ballet shoes and the tutu. Well, maybe not.
But
Um,
but on that
but
point, you
having
were
done
talking
that,
about, yeah, you were
sorry,
talking
sorry,
about
go ahead.
you were talking about your role at the community foundation. So there's
Yeah,
over 100,
so
yeah, there's 196 community foundations in Canada. I established one here in my local community. It's a great way for your clients to volunteer and to learn about what's actually going on. Some of them do some great research. So I'm glad to hear that you're really involved in that.
yeah, and it's been interesting getting to know just how much of it's volunteer driven and how dependent they are on funding from outside of government sources, and just how passionate people are.
Hmm.
And that's also been interesting to be able to help navigate people when they want to give, they want to do something. It's how do we identify what the right way is to do that? Because I think that's also an interesting
Hmm.
component you bring, which is to help shape people's intention to something a little bit more specific, right? Because one thing I've always believed is that when people give, they're not really giving for a tax reason. Like we'll talk in a little while about
Hmm.
financial structures and how to make them advantageous when you do it. But I've always believed that no one writes a check to the Cancer Foundation or the Kidney Foundation, or they're really, when they write the check, it says it's to mom or my
Hmm.
wife or my child, right? Or my friend. That's really what's happening. So how do we take that intent to really make it get to where people feel it's going to have the best outcome? And so part of that is understanding what the choices are. And so
Hmm.
before we talk about that, one thing I know that happens, and I'm curious for your view on this, is do most of the charities, do most charitable contributions wind up in the same place? Do people kind of go with the same idea all the time? And is that a good thing, a bad thing? Because I suspect that a lot of times people just go to
Yes.
the same idea, and those things get a lot of money, and other things that maybe if they put a bit more time and effort in, there'd be other causes that maybe are more in need of support. Like how does that flow?
Well, as I said, 47% of giving happens in year end. So there are charities out there that are very smart and they're great marketers and they get a lot of money. And the interesting piece is about 16 billion is given in Canada every year, and 1.5 billion of that goes to the top 10 charities.
Wow.
9% of all giving goes to the top 10.
Those are the same things.
Yeah, it's the same group and it's the same offenders year over year. There's a few new ones, and a lot of those are really strong brands. But of late, the past few years, the number one fundraising charity, and I'm talking direct donations from consumers, our clients and donors, right now is World Vision. And they are an incredible marketing machine. I have to declare my bias for smaller charities. I'm just going to say that now. As a founder of a couple of different charities and foundations, I have a bias and I just fully declare it because I really feel that there's so much capacity in our Canadian marketplace and the people. There's so much capacity to give, but sometimes you can be lazy and just write a check, and that's okay. It's actually not being lazy. It's doing something. But I think if you I ask my clients to contemplate their navel. Think about your childhood. Think about what made you who you are, what made you successful. You're dealing with wealthy clients all the time. Consider the inside and then consider what organizations supported you to become who you are today.
Mm.
And
Oh,
my son is a scout, and
yep.
my grandfather was a scout, my dad was a scout. It's a great organization. So a lot of the volunteering I do, and I get grants for them, but I'm the camp cook. My spouse and I, we're there on 3-day weekends cooking from 5 in the morning till 12 at night. But I also write a check, and that's that balance between putting your sweat equity in, but also putting some equity in.
No, that's a great example. I did Cubs and Scouts and Beavers and everything as a kid, and then I did it again
Mm-hmm.
as a parent and a leader and all that stuff. So, which was fun to do it again
Mm-hmm.
as an adult and having a really wonderful reconnection and seeing the kids go through that. So, I think that's a wonderful example. It's also interesting that you said like the marketing from certain charities is better than
Mm-hmm.
others. So, like I bought goats and things
So have
from World
I.
Vision, so I've done that. But you're right, with a little more work. So then I got introduced to Sleeping Children Around the World through Warren Wagstaff, who's one
Yeah.
of our advisors in Vancouver. And he kind of walked me through that experience and I signed up. So Sue and I, or my wife, we went to Tanzania
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago now. And we gave out over 3,000 bed kits to kids. And that was wonderful to go from just doing a donation with cash to actually
Mm-hmm.
doing it in person and having a very different experience. And I have to thank our clients. So many clients supported that. We bought, I think just on our own team, I don't know if we cracked 1,000, but it was hundreds of bed kits for kids. So they also got to be part of that whole experience. And I think
Yeah.
not only did we do good work, but I think it was also inventive and we found new and interesting ways to meet needs that I don't think most people would have known about unless you had someone introduce you to that idea. So you
Yeah.
play a role in that, don't you? You really can help us
Mm-hmm.
navigate the choices with clients. That if they have an intention, you can help find a better way to do it than just them going, I'll just go on Google and figure it out, right? So have you got some stories where you've helped people really kind of match up what they wanted to do with a specific charity that has been a better outcome than they expected?
Yeah, so I'm just reflecting on one of the clients. I was sitting at the kitchen table having tea with the accountant, the advisor, mom and dad, and the 19-year-old son. I was here in Surrey in Canada, in BC, and it was an interesting conversation because dad was an immigrant. He'd done a really great job, built this great business. He just sold it, but they were still operating, and he had some tax issues. So clients come to us because over here they have tax issues, and over here they have a charitable desire. Usually they meet. 9 out of 10 they meet, but sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
So in this particular case, mom and dad, lovely couple, great tea and cookies, by the way. So we're having the conversation, and the son is on the phone. Like I don't have my phone right now, so the son is like this through the conversation.
Oh,
And I looked at dad and I looked at mom and I said, "Well, Mr. Smith, so do you give as a family?" And he said, "Oh, well, yeah, sometimes." And he said to his son, "Tell Janine what you do." And he said, "Well, I went to private school." And I said, "Yeah, that's great." And he said, "Well, I got a chance to go to Guatemala." And I said, "Oh, Guatemala, what did you do down there?" "Well, I built houses." I said, "Oh, so you're interested in construction?" He said, "Yeah, I'm actually going to go to BCIT or Kwantlen, I can't remember, and take a program on this." He said, "It's a 2-year program, and then I can come out and work in construction." I said, "Well, that'll be complementary to dad's business." He said, "Yeah," but he said, "I really want to go back there. I want to go back to the village that I stayed at, and I want to support that." And I said, "Well, the organization that you went through," I said, that's a charity here in Canada, isn't it?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, I looked at mom and dad and said, "Hey, mom and dad, how do you feel about allocating a portion of your giving this year to that charity? And maybe in 2 or 3 years when he graduates, we can set up a sustainable gift so that he can go down and lead a project or get his friends involved." And the phone, I tell you, surprise you not, the phone went
gone.
like this, gone. He was at the table. And that to me is a perfect example about making the giving relevant and making it something that the whole family could share in. It had an application for mom and dad because they were able to have the conversation. And they were really cool because they said, he's like, "Why are you giving money away anyhow?" And they said, "You're not getting it all. We're going to give you enough that you can be successful, but not so much that you don't do anything." I think
Right.
that's a Warren Buffett quote or something to that effect. So that was,
Well,
to me, that's a great story.
Well, and actually, you know what? One of the things that we've experienced, through one of our clients is the degree to which this kind of giving can really create a new connection amongst family, right? So,
Mhm.
so we had a situation a couple of years ago where one of our clients, the wife passed away very sadly, very tragically, very early. And so, in the conversation with the husband, and they have adult children. It was like they wanted to do something to memorialize her and her life, and there were some very specific charities. But one of the things that we decided to do, because they asked me to be part of the dialogue and I was able to help share some ideas with them, was we did set up what's called the donor advised fund, and you and I are going to talk about that in a few minutes, is one of the mechanisms or ideas to be able to fulfill a gift. And so what happens is we decided to move some securities, and actually there's a whole big tax benefit, but that wasn't the reason to do it, but that was a nice element. And we put it into the donor advised fund, and that allows them to make gifts annually to causes and things that they knew would have mattered to their mom and to their wife. And one of the great elements of it that I think the dad was really happily surprised about was that the kind of policy structure of it, if you will, the framework of it, was an opportunity for him to bring the kids together every year to decide, okay, guys, we're going to gift this much money from the foundation that we created in mom's name, and who are we going to give it to this year, and how much are we going to give? And it was an opportunity. He said this creates legacy for not just her memory, but every year they'll get together as a family, and then eventually the grandkids will be part of it, to have a discussion and remember mom. And so that, to me, I'm going to cry telling you the story. It was such a nice component that went along with the creation of the legacy. So I think for families, there's so many dimensions of this that can be really powerful for not just the people that have passed and the people that are going to receive, but also for the people that are doing the giving, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's wonderful.
And just to dovetail on that, Darren, and you identify a really great point in that it creates that connection. But the other piece is, and what people forget, is when you do philanthropy together, when you give together, you're teaching values of fiscal prudence to your kids. You're teaching how you can make the money, make an allocation for giving. And depending on the faith, there may be a faith-related issue within that particular giving group. There are some faiths that mandate it. So now you're seeing this already embedded into the family at the youngest generation. So if that was the wife that passed away, and then there was kids, and then there's the next generation, they know that every year that they're going to go and they're going to do that. Because what I find in Canada is with our donors, when they first come to us, they're so used to just reacting because a charity called.
Yes.
In this process, and from what I remember of this situation with you, is it gave the family a time to do their mission, vision, and values. It gave them a time to consider what was important to mom, and to define the gift that would be valuable to not just her memory, but to bring everybody together. Doing that thoughtfully is now part of planning. That's not just reacting. Mom died of cancer, so I'm going to throw money at cancer. Dad passed away from Alzheimer's. I'm going to give money there. It's about celebrating the life that that person had, but also making a meaningful gift. And it's interesting because clients come to me all the time. They go, oh, I want to give $1 million to this charity. I'm like, great, that's fantastic. First, don't tell them anything about your gift. I want you to go down and I want you to volunteer. I want you to do some research on their website. I want you to learn about the charity, find out what their gaps are. Could they benefit from some of your professional experience or even your network? Get to know them first, because I think everybody has this desire to give, and it's so big. And when they realize it, they want to push it out there. But I always tell people to kind of pull back, because what you might find, and I've seen this before, is you get to know a charity, you might not like how they run. You might not like their business model. You might think they could be more efficient. You might want to give them money right away so that they can satisfy a particular need. Maybe they have issues with technology or marketing. Who knows? But get to know them first, just like you do a job interview. You need to do your own research. And people ask me every day, well, don't you have a short list? I said, well, my list is very different than yours.
Well, actually, this is a very interesting kind of do's and don'ts component we can focus on here. So a do is really spend some time and do some due diligence and get to know the charity. And the don't is don't jump right in just because they called or it sounds excellent or it sounds sexy. Let's actually put some time in. What are some other do's and don'ts? Because we do hear about charities that, for example, will have a high administrative cost. So, you give them $1 and only 5 cents goes to the actual cause because everything else is consumed. What are some of the other guidance components you give to people on things to watch out for or things to do better?
Well, first, pick your cause or pick your area of interest. That's the most important. Plan for that organization or that type. And I'll give an example is the best way to illustrate the context. I work with investment advisors like yourself. They're very specific on how to analyze companies, and they understand that administrative cost. So I have this very senior advisor in Victoria, and he says we shouldn't give to charities that spend more than 50 cents on the dollar in their administrative costs. That should just be a policy. And I said, that's really great, but let me tell you a story. So I was volunteering with an AIDS agency. I was the head of the foundation, and we funded 10 different charities. Every year I would take my family, my wife and son, to volunteer at the Children's AIDS event. They had a summer camp for kids that were HIV positive, or they had respite for the parents. So if the parents had HIV, they could send their kids to this camp. It was fully funded. They brought kids from all over the country. It's still going on right now. So I would take my son, and I remember my son was 3 years old at the time. We were volunteering, giving out the T-shirts and all of that. This would have been 11 years ago. And he met this little girl. Unbeknownst to us, of course, she was HIV positive. They had a great day. She actually took him under her wing, and she played with him, and they had a lovely time. At that board, we used to fund this camp, and every year it would be a super huge fight with our membership, because they're like, well, kids don't need summer camp, and they don't need to have any fun. This is about, we want to fund really difficult things for people. And I said, okay, well, we don't know how anybody contracted that particular disease, and we don't know any judgment. But what we did learn was that particular camp, because it was HIV related, there was doctors and nurses. There was like 13 different doctors and 13 different nurses on a 1 week basis, and it was a pro rata per child. The cost of doing that, because of the union and the contracts, they had to pay these nurses and doctors as honorarium. So their operating costs were super high, but the value that was received by the children was
also super high.
Super high. And I said to my board at the time, I was like, how can you judge what's more valuable? In this particular case, 75 cents on the dollar went to pay for the operating costs, and only 25 cents went to pay for the actual event and to that program. But the value, it changed those children's lives. And I learned years later that young lady lives and has a wonderful life, and she's, I guess she's in her 20s now. But before I left the board, we had some communication back and forth, and that event changed her life. And my son will never forget that young girl, and he thinks about it, and we talk about it as a family. So I think it's all about perspective and evaluation. You can't apply business methodologies when you're evaluating the impact. And so that's the piece I would say. Stop talking about the money, but look at the impact. And if the impact is okay for you, that was a judgment call for my family, we still ties to that particular organization, because we know it's important. And we know kids camps change kids' lives.
No, that's a great kind of perspective to have. I want to then move a little bit to ways in which people can gift, right? So for example, they could just they can have a charity, one lump sum, here's the money, and then walk away from it. We've seen people use insurance as a methodology to be able to do this. We can talk about setting up your own foundation. We can talk about donor advised funds. So why don't we begin at maybe the simplest one is, and we can kind of talk about do's and don'ts, pros and cons a little bit. Yeah. Someone just says, listen, I want to make a sizable contribution to one specific charity. Okay, wonderful. Maybe you get your name on a door. But is that really a good thing, or some other things to think about before you do that?
So what I've learned in this industry is that the tax issue over here that we talked about before doesn't necessarily coincide with the charitable gift timing. So
explain that. Yeah, bridge that a little bit more for me.
Yeah, sure. So let's say I own a company and I sell my company and I've got some tax issues. It's the middle of the summer. I don't have any clue of what charity I would actually want to give money to, but I've got a tax issue. I want to liberate some capital from my capital dividend account, or I want to reduce some of my tax payable. I want the corporation to make the donation. I don't really have time to do it at that point to a direct charity. And I don't have the time to consider, because this may be a sizable gift. So in this particular case, what you could do is open a charitable giving fund, also known as a donor advised fund. You can still give the gift, whether it's securities or cash or proceeds from life insurance or private shares to that effect. That can still be received into the foundation in a charitable giving fund. We park the money. In this particular case, you would sell out the assets and do a balanced portfolio. The client can focus on the company, the sale, whatever they have, the earn out, the buyout, whatever they're doing on that side. And that gives you a little bit of time so that the company owner or that individual can go back to their family and say, well, we have this charitable offering. Now we can start giving out. That may take them a year to unwind the company and everything that they need to do, but they can do the gift up front and they can sit it in the charitable giving fund. It can be managed, it can grow. And by the time they figure out what they want to give, it'll be thoughtful at that point, because
So just,
really it's a timing difference.
yeah, so just to clarify that, so the person wants to make the gift, their accountant, their financial advisor, Vicky or Andrea said, we need to do this from a timing perspective. And actually this year is an interesting one because we have a lot of people that are worried about the capital gains rate going up at some point soon. So they're looking to say, okay, I have these embedded capital gains in my business, my property. What can I do about that? And we'll talk in a minute about how making a charitable donation can manage some of those things. But so what you're getting at is that the person could make a donation, but if they go to a specific charity, that's done, and they may rush that decision. Whereas if they set up their own charitable foundation, they can put the capital in, get the tax stuff figured out in that tax year, and then because it's sitting invested in their own charitable foundation, that they can then take their time to make gifts. And that also can be set up almost in perpetuity, right? That can fund gifts for a long time, not just one and done.
Yeah, and so it's about, do you want to give a lump sum to a charity where they are managed? What did I say? 54% of charities are entirely run by volunteers, and they're using investment committees. Why don't they let their money continue to be managed by their investment advisor, who's a great money manager, and then give out the income or give out a percentage or a flat amount every year? And we see that more often, that clients really would, they have this capital event, or they have this taxable event. They want to park their money, rebalance it, let it grow, because in a lot of those other options, that money's gone. They're not getting any benefit from the growth. In this particular option, with your money management, it grows, and then they can give out that portion or that stream of income. I'm just a big believer, and I've seen some very poor situations where lump sums have been donated to charities, and then these volunteers or the management go a little bit crazy on, oh, well, let's get new chairs, or let's build a building and we don't really have a purpose for it, or it's about holding their feet. I would rather fund 10 years of a particular program than just give them $100,000
at once
lump sum.
So, but here's a question though, because like traditionally, to be able to give to a foundation, create your own, was really reserved for very substantial gifts. Like unless someone was giving millions of dollars, the cost to set up all of that infrastructure, to run a foundation, to create the foundation, run it, employ whoever needs to be, was like, unless you're giving millions of dollars, you wouldn't do it, right? So what's happened to be able to create these donor advised funds? Like how much would somebody need to give to have their own donor advised funds, and how expensive is it to have your own?
Yeah, so I really see it as democratization of philanthropy. That's what's happened out there. Our minimum here at Raymond James is 100,000. Some vendors have 250,000 as a minimum. Others have $1 million, and then there's some that are down there to 10,000. Our offering is specific in that 100,000 range, specifically because we're working with investment advisors, and we really don't want you to manage money on a single account under 100,000.
Right.
So that's that first initial hurdle, and you do have to keep it over that. We do ask our clients to give on an annual basis. So whether they're giving, 2% or they're giving 10%, because it's inside a donor advised fund, they're not constrained by the same rules that CRA is. Okay, so they don't have to give out in any given year, but they could give out more. My disposition rate last year was over 60%. So for every dollar we have on the books, we gave out 60 cents last year. It was incredible. But I also helped set up a private foundation with one of our clients. So
but how wildly expensive is someone to be able to create that?
So we at the foundation charge a 1% fee, and then the investment advisor charges their fee. So all in, it's usually around the 2% range, which is relatively in the market of anybody else.
Yeah, so it becomes very cost effective as opposed to hiring your own lawyers and your own accountants and everything else to try and run one, right? So that becomes that's just the leverage of technology and capacity to be able to do that. So now we've taken a strategy that was really only designed initially for really high net worth giving, down to where a lot more people can access that technique, right?
Yeah, and what I also find is it's one thing to set up a foundation, but it's an entity in itself, and it has ongoing maintenance. So instead of you having to have an individual or a volunteer or someone like me do it, we do it under the guise of the foundation. So we have one executive director, we have my entire team, we do all the administration, we do the tax filings, all that piece. We remain compliant with CRA, and the rules are always changing. So because of that relationship, we do all that work. We really feel like we liberate the client so that they're able to focus on what's important to them and the giving side. And we don't interfere in that giving at all. Like there are no restrictions so long as it is a qualified donee and a registered charity here in Canada. We do some cross-border giving. And we
Right.
can do that on the university side because we go by CRA's website on the charities directorate.
So let's jump. I'm glad you mentioned the cross-border thing because we've got the largest cross-border practice in the firm in North America. So we have a lot of clients. We have a lot of Americans in Canada, a lot of Americans in America, Canadians in America. So the border introduces a level of complexity to pretty much any planning anybody does. So when we've got a cross-border scenario, so let's start with an easy one, which is the Canadian wants to make a donation, but the charity's in the United States. So how would that work? Is that even possible, or is it only if it's a university or something? So we got a Canadian wants to make a donation, charities in the US. Can they do that?
The answer is always going to be it depends. So like with anything across borders, it's depending on what the treaty says. But in the Canadian market,
these are my lines, Janine. I'm the one that says this stuff to people.
No.
It depends on what the treaty says.
I'm in a world of gray here. So, and that's why we do such a custom solution. So in that particular case, if it's a US resident living in Canada, okay, they're now a Canadian resident as well.
Okay.
They have Canadian residency. They could have a Raymond James Canada Foundation donor advice fund. We could send money across the border, but we would only send it to CRA qualified donees. Okay.
I see. So CRA, the Canadian tax will have a list of who can accept based on
that changes. Okay.
So that's fun.
A good example is the Aga Khan Foundation used to be a qualified international charity. It is no longer, unless it has changed since I've looked at the website. So it's a fluid, it's a moving document. So I'm not going to say yes or no, but in the States, primarily it's universities. But remember, universities do an incredible amount of work in lots of different areas. So if you're funding something in Sao Paulo or somewhere down in Texas, and that Texas university is working in a partnership with another very large charity, we can flow the funds to that particular university. And I think this is where our particular strength comes in here in Canada, is that I'm not sure if everybody knows, but every school district in Canada is a qualified donee. Every municipality in Canada is a qualified donee. So if there's a project you want funded, you can donate to your local municipality, or you can donate to the school district or the individual school or the individual classroom. You want to take on a meal program, fund that. That's what that client in Surrey I was talking about. They fund 2 classrooms in Surrey right now. They're full meal programs. So my job often is listening to what the client wants to do. What is their modus operandi? What do they want to achieve? What's their magic wand? What makes a difference in the world for them? And then my job is to work with them to find out how to get it done. And if we can get it done within the construct of what CRA lets us do.
So then, okay, so this is really helpful. So let's move to the American in Canada wants to donate, because there's all these incredibly complicated gift tax rules and other things that American tax filers have to be thoughtful about. So if they open up a charitable foundation in Canada, what's the rule for an American tax filer? Can they give whatever they want, or do they have rules that they have to be mindful of?
Okay, so, and I'm just hearing my dog whine at the door, so I apologize. Welcome to working from home. So wherever they are a resident and wherever they are earning the income is where the donation should go. So if they're a US resident in Canada and their income is in the United States, they should probably have a US charitable giving fund.
Yeah.
And we do have that option, and you can manage through our US parent company's been doing this for over 20 years. So we have a very comprehensive offering under the Raymond James Trust offering down in the States. If they are a US resident here in Canada, but they're earning money and they're paying taxes here in Canada, they can have a Canadian one.
Got it.
They could have both. And we actually have a client that had both, recently passed away. So we have funds in Canada and we have funds in the States, and we give to similar or the same charities. So this particular client out of Ontario has their alma mater as a beneficiary in both their US and Canadian DAFs. And so we give to it, and the US one gives to it. In Canada, we give to the other charities, specifically, they're the mirrored charity in Canada to the US, but we only give to the Canadian registered charity that's operating here in Canada.
So this is interesting. So it's interesting that we have that capability on the US side. So no matter which side of the border the person is or may become, we can actually manage the creation of these structures for them in either country. So I think I don't think any other firm in Canada has that capability to do that in the US for somebody, to make that process pretty seamless. We may be unique in that. I don't know. I haven't done a poll.
Not in financial institutions. I think most of them, our U.S. Parent company won't send money over the border to Canada, but we'll send money over there because we're legislated differently here. They're through a trust, we're through a foundation. And I just think it's really complimentary for the advisors to be able to at least have the conversation with the clients,
Right.
because regardless of who they are, they have that charitable interest. We can find a way to make it happen. It's just about deep dive, and that's why we have the 100,000 minimum.
Right. Yeah, which makes sense, right? Now, I also want to jump into another idea that people will come across, which is this use of life insurance as a way to make a gift. Can you talk a bit about how that would work? Because we can also facilitate that strategy if people wanted to do that.
Sure. The two that we're most commonly seeing is if you, let's say you had a paid up policy because you sold your company or you had a buy sell agreement, you could donate that policy to your donor advised fund at Raymond James. And then if there was any, then the beneficiary, that's actually a giving of the actual policy. Then there's a cash surrender value that's done in an actuarial analysis in advance of us receiving the gift. In that particular case, we would have everything laid out in terms and conditions well in advance of a gift acceptance agreement. The other piece is, if you have a policy that you're just writing, you can magnify your gift by writing a new policy and making the foundation the beneficiary. And that would have implications on your estate giving if that's something that you would consider. So you can do it today, or you can do it from an old policy. Each one of those situations, we work with our insurance advisors on those. And the paid up policy, I think, is probably more relevant to many of our clients because so many of them are mid to small business owners, and they have these, but they just don't know what to do with them. So it's a great way for them to be able to donate them. But we work with our insurance services team on any of those.
Which is great, because if someone may have a policy that they had for years, there's a lot of cash value built up in it, and they're like, how do I repurpose that? Because maybe my family doesn't need it anymore, right? So that's a great way to do that. We also seen people say, listen, how about I go get a life insurance policy? Can you sell me a new one and donate a charity or my foundation as the beneficiary, so that when I do pass away, that's when there's a large gift that will be created at that time. Now, if they do that, are their premiums tax deductible as a donation? How does that work?
I'm going to defer to Debbie Wong on that. I'm not going to talk tax.
Fair enough. We will say maybe.
Sorry, not an accountant.
Back to my favorite word on some of this stuff, which is maybe. But I think actually, let's jump into that for one sec. So there are some really interesting tax benefits to doing some of this. Again, I always revert back to people usually gift out of love, right? That's why they're doing it. At the same time, we need to be thoughtful and reflective of like, okay, well, what are the tax implications? What are the financial components of giving a gift? So can you just take us through a little bit of that, how that math kind of works? So when someone's making a gift of $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, how does that flow through on their tax return? How does that work?
Well, I can speak to strategy. As I said, I'm not an accountant. So from CRA, they say, great job, you've made a charitable gift. What you're able to use that tax receipt for is to reduce your income. So during your lifetime, you can reduce your income up to 75% with a current charitable gift. And when you make that charitable gift donation, let's say I made $1 million donation to my charitable giving fund, and I have annual income of $200,000, I can use that $1 million tax receipt. I can use it for the gift year plus 5 years. So I can use, if I wanted, $200,000 a year, but I'm still probably going to have some extra. So maybe I have some capital gains, maybe I have some other income inclusions that I can't offset, but you can reduce up to 75%. What they also say, and I like to say that when you pass away, there's 3 beneficiaries. Okay, there's the government, there's your family, and then there's charity. So choose 2. Because you can choose 2. Because CRA also
let's
says,
not choose the government, right? I think that's what most people are going to say. Not those guys.
I've only ever had one person say they choose the government since I've been at RJ, and that's 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
One person, and he was a public company CEO. But in any case, because what CRA says is you can actually reduce your income by 100% with a charitable gift on death. And with the advent of the graduated rate estate in 2016, you can lay off your charitable gifts with multiple returns over several years, up to 5 years. Now, when you do a graduated rate estate, I'm not an expert, but you're working with your accountant. That's an election that you do on your first tax filing, or your executor does on the first tax filing. And it means that you may have made that $1 million donation, but in your first year after death, your income is $300,000. So they're going to lay it off over several years, because there are people that have distributions that take more, estates that take more than 1 year to file. So
Right.
the graduated rate estate is a very complex scenario, but it's very advantageous to be able to reduce your taxes on an overall basis.
So one key component of this is the timing of when you take the charitable, the tax benefit of it, right? And as you say,
Yes.
you do have up to 5 years, and there's special rules on death. So this is where Vicky and Andrew and our team will help clients map out kind of
Absolutely.
how we can take maximum tax advantage of these things and how we build it into the estate plan. One specific idea I want to jump on, which is the idea of donating securities that have got capital gains already in them. And again, we'll come back to, we really believe that it won't be too far before the rate of tax jumps on that. I think, I think that because they spent so much money in the pandemic, they're going to be becoming very inventive about how they find new ways to tax us. This to me seems like an easy one, and the NDP have been advocating for it for a long time. So if someone has built up capital gains in their portfolio, and they're like, ooh, geez, do I just trigger the tax bill now? Or maybe I can use this opportunity to give to charity. So how does that work if they have securities that have a capital gain and they give it to charity? What happens next? Because I know the answer is good.
Well, there's an absolute elimination of the capital gain. So what a lot of clients do that have large investment portfolios is I have my Apple stock and I bought it at $2. I'm going to donate it at $300. They can buy it back in their regular account, but what they get is the full donation receipt of the total amount. So if their adjusted cost base is $100,000, they're getting that full tax receipt for $100,000. They have zero capital gains on the portion that they've donated.
Right, which allows them to make an even bigger gift, right? Because what we wouldn't want somebody to do is sell the security, trigger the tax, and then give the proceeds to the charity. That's not tax efficient.
No, I learned of a case recently where there was a very large investment portfolio over the $20 million range, and the investment advisor sold it out and then gave the money to the charity. Now, remember I talked about the graduated rate estate? In that particular situation, when you do a charitable gift on within the estate side, they can go back a year and file and refile with those charitable gifts. So that particular financial institution really screwed up.
Wow.
So this is why it's really important to work with people that understand estate rules and estate tax, lawyers, accountants, investment advisors, or financial advisors that are really experts in this field. And I would say people purport to be experts, but they don't necessarily have the backing. And so you have to be really careful, and they need to be able to explain it to you. I deal with the charitable gift side and making sure that those gifts don't fail, but there are a incredible amount of gifts in Canada that fail because of faulty wording, lawyer mistakes. I've seen things where spouses' names haven't even been put in the wills. So it's about really being diligent on that side.
Wow. Well, and again, getting great advice on this is absolutely essential, because if we're going to do something, let's find the right way to do it, the right methodology. Let's make sure the tax stuff lines up, and maybe we can find a way to find new charities to do things that we never thought of before. I want to touch on a specific example that's kind of active and live right now, where we had a charity get funded within Raymond James, and your guidance specifically was so helpful in doing it. So do you want to talk for a minute about the Raymond James Memorial Fund that we set up and kind of what led to what we created?
Yeah, so 2019 was a tough year. Raymond James lost 3 fantastic advisors and senior executive. And as an organization, we wanted to find a way to memorialize those individuals. But so we took a charitable giving fund, the option that we talked about today, and we set one up. Our board did the documentation and set it up, and we provided an online portal for giving. And we just did a fundraiser last week, or this started Friday, and we've already raised over, I think, $55,000 in 1 week. And what we're doing is we're creating a permanent memorial fund so that when an advisor or an associate or an employee of Raymond James passes away, the ad hoc committee or group committee, which you're a founder of, Darren, comes together with the relationship of the person who's passed away, and they figure out a charity or a potential beneficiary in order to recognize the gift of that person. So in the case of the 3 gentlemen that passed away, Mario, Mike, and Martin, we're looking at 3 different charities so that we as an organization can make a donation to those charities in their memoriam. And then the branches and the people in addition will be able to make contributions in the family. And we're including the family in the whole process. You, of course, are connected to the families. And so you're the one who's having the conversation with the families about what was important to them, what was important to Mario, what did he want to see happen. And what is even better is that our firm has matched all those donations. So we've now got over $100,000 ready. We're going to keep that fund on a permanent basis. We're going to hold on to it. We're going to give out grants on an annual basis. So I think the grants are anywhere from $1,000 to $25,000, and your committee is going to determine what that is in the new year. The idea is to create a permanent fund so that it can grow, and then at any time we can activate it, turn it on, and if something unfortunate happens, we've got something ready to go. And I think that's the hard part, is to establish it when the crisis was happening was really difficult. And it's taken us almost a year to get there. And all three of those individuals had incredible contributions. And we just want to make sure that we can recognize it and celebrate how they lived, and with the support of the family. So we're doing that in concert with the family and with you and some of the others on the team.
Yeah, and it's a great case study for clients to see how, like, we just went through this as a kind of Raymond James family. How do we take a very sad, tragic event? We had 3 people pass away relatively one after another, and one very suddenly, heart attack while he's walking to work. The other one had brain cancer. So very, very sad. And it affected a lot of people in the organization. And so how do we take a tragic moment and try to find something positive out of it? And I remember when we were first talking about it, it's like, what do we do? And so people have different ideas, and everybody's kind of short of themselves. We want to do something, we just don't know what exactly. And, scholarship, is that something we do, or what? And, Janine, your guidance, your expertise, your insight to be able to come to the people that were pushing for this and say, why don't we do a couple of structures that accomplish a bunch of things? So how do we memorialize the people that are gone? How do we create a gift that can last a long time? How do we include family in some of these conversations? So and then get financial support and structuring. So there were a lot of moving parts. And I will say to the clients, it was a very different for me to go through it as an active participant and as opposed to an advisor, because it's interesting when you can be a coach and a spectator, but when you're actually on the field, it's a little different. So certainly, I think, giving me a bit more empathy to the emotional side of how you create it and how you need to keep your mind open to some of the ideas. And you wind up actually, by going through the process we did, I think we wound up with a much better place through that dialogue and through your guidance. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks. It was a difficult thing. One of the advisors that was out here in Vancouver, Abbotsford, I knew, and he was incredibly generous. And he actually caught a sickness when he was traveling. He came back and died within 30 days. So shocking. Terrible. So you never know when some things are going to happen, but I think that his branch manager did a great job and great presentation and shared a little bit about him, and it really brought it together, because there are people, we're of an age that people pass away. I can't believe I'm saying that, but
true.
But it was a great thing for me, and great legacy to be able to create this legacy fund. And I often deal with clients when they're in that kind of tragedy, and it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. So you have to be sensitive, and you want to make it tax efficient, because you don't want them to get the double whammy, but sometimes they just want to get it done. But securities, I would always, just back to our original point on the securities donations, it is the most favorable form of tax treatment, making a securities donation. You manage their securities, this would be the first place that I would start, for sure.
Yeah, and then coming back to the fact that, and it's interesting this year, of a lot of things dovetailing together, right? So we've got, the market's been favorable to a bunch of securities, so maybe this is the year to really use those to make a bigger gift. We've got the pandemic, which has affected everybody, but charities in particular are probably more in need now than they've been in maybe ever for support. And we've got people at home going, how do I do something positive out of such a bizarre, crazy year? Like, how do I find a way to make my world a bit of a better place? 2020 has been bonkers. So maybe I can do something to put a positive spin and get karma working back in our direction a little bit. I'm going to kind of close it off there. I don't know if we've had any questions come in. No, people are quiet, and we're going to share this as a recording because not everybody can be on the line at the same time. But I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm going to thank you very much for being on our team and working with us and really helping us and our clients add another dimension to making their wishes and their dreams come true. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I do see myself as a money liberator. So if you need help in liberation, I have lots of opinions and ideas, but you take what you like and you leave the rest.
Oh, for sure. And for the clients that are watching, one of the big, like every year I try to have a bit of a planning, not a mission, but kind of something I say to Andrew and Vicky, like, let's make sure this year we really spend some time on this. And so there are two big things we're really focusing on for the rest of 2020 to 2021. And they're kind of connected. The first one is, how do we really look at the circle of care around the family and the friends that we have, because this pandemic has touched so many people, and
Mhm.
often financially in a way no one expected. So we've thought about circle of care around elderly parents and friends, but let's actually look at our plan, because whatever we want to do financially is tied to what someone else is doing. So let's just widen our scope a little bit, and let's see who else maybe we need to be caring about.
Mhm.
And then as part of that, it leads into, let's really have a focused conversation for people that want to have it around philanthropy and charitable giving, so we can widen that circle of care to other causes in their communities that they care about and they want to do something about. So all this is good stuff. And again, if we can make the karma go in our direction and get rid of the murder hornets and everything else, then that's all good. So
Well, thanks for the chat today, Darren. I really appreciate it, and it's great to see leadership from a team like yours. And I enjoy working with your team. I know our entire team enjoys it. So bring it on.
everybody,
I love all the difficult questions, and we don't always have the immediate answer, but we'll find it.
oh, that's great. Well, listen, everybody loves Pedro, so that's all the always positive, and everybody else too. Okay, so for those of you watching, thank you very much for attending today. Really appreciate it, and give us your ideas for other conversations and people and ideas you'd like to hear about and hear from. So with that, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.